IISD Reporting Services is here in Poland reporting on selected side events convening in parallel with the Warsaw Climate Change Conference. On Tuesday, an event organized by the Friends of Fossil Fuel Subsidy Reform and the International Institute for Sustainable Development provided a platform to focus on the opportunities that fossil fuel subsidy reform holds for reducing CO2 emissions, and in particular, the role of the UNFCCC in supporting this process. It is increasingly acknowledged that fossil fuel subsidy reform has the potential to mitigate climate change. Benefits include improving country fiscal balances, minimizing market distortions, and freeing up public resources. However, there are many challenges involved in implementing subsidy reforms. Damon Visdanbar summarized the session.
So the event was really to I think, have kind of a more informal discussion around fossil fuel subsidies. Looking at the climate change benefits, we're getting a lot more information about the CO2 reductions that would result from a reduction in fossil fuel subsidies.
Tim Grosser, Minister for Trade and of Climate Change for New Zealand, explained why fossil fuel subsidy reform is vital.
This is a massive issue economically, because there's massive waste going on here, and it's a massive issue in terms of climate change. You've heard the estimates, adding up to something like between 10 and 13% of global emissions in terms of the potential of eliminating fossil fuel subsidies. So I think, frankly, we've got to be a little bit patient, but slowly this idea is beginning to get embedded in the political process. And I think the panel today is simply another step in that direction.
One of the panelists was RACHMAT WITOELAR, the Indonesian president's special envoy for climate change. He shared his country's experiences on withdrawing fossil fuel subsidies.
Because this transformation is not well received generally by the public initially. So we started transforming ourselves from an exporting country into an importing country around 2000. And that is where the word subsidy comes to light. And
Damon Visdanbar elaborated on the social implications of imposing fossil fuel subsidy reform.
You can't just focus on fuel pricing, you need to think about what kind of policies surround that. Indonesia introduced a cash transfer system at the same time that it raised prices, also invested in education and healthcare. So I think redirecting some of those savings to other public goods is important in terms of the kind of larger process in which this takes place.
During the panel discussion, Simon Upton from the OECD emphasized the importance of communication when imposing subsidy reforms and highlighted other fiscal policy considerations.
There is, it seems to be, an issue here about how you communicate things, how well things are communicated, the wisdom of communicating in advance, how much you communicate, which groups you're trying to get to. Just looking at not subsidy removal, but the imposition of taxes, which is the opposite side, if you like. Subsidies are a negative price on carbon. Carbon prices are, it's putting a positive price on. We've been doing a bit of parallel horizontal work looking at the experience of countries trying to impose carbon taxes. Now, they have exactly the same distributional consequences as subsidy removal. You're changing the playing field. And one would have to say that the experience of countries differs enormously. There are cases of absolutely clean, protested against, but clean takeoff, and there's processes of meltdown. And I suspect the same is true in the subsidies field.
Laura COZZI of the International Energy Agency explained that her organization has just released an update of their World Energy Outlook for 2013 report, which quantifies fossil fuel subsidies in monetary terms.
And we have estimated that globally, fossil fuel consumption subsidies amount to $544 billion. Reforming fossil fuel subsidies is a very challenging theme for many governments. We see that in the very long term, to 2050, this could cut emissions by 6%, but more importantly, even just starting with fossil fuel subsidies reform in a gradual manner, mostly in oil importing countries, would help by 2020, together with energy efficiency and renewables, put emissions to a peak and stabilize them in 2020. So it will be already a very, very important step forwards to reach the long-term goal of stabilizing temperature below 2 degrees.
question on whether the renewable energy sector is lobbying for the removal of fossil fuel subsidies, CZAJKOWSKA from the Bloomberg New Energy Finance said,
I haven't seen strong orchestrated efforts of private companies doing that yet, arguing against the removal of subsidies altogether. Now, that said, with the first wave of renewable energy subsidies being scaled down, I expect this to come very strongly very soon.
On the interface between fossil fuel subsidy reform and the UNFCCC process, Tim Grosser emphasized that
there's a bigger debate here. We have, my country, New Zealand, has a very strong view that it's not useful for the UNFCCC to get too protective of its patch here. Actually, we need a whole lot of institutions working on this agenda from different perspectives with different interests and different tools at their disposal. So I do not buy into this argument that the UNFCCC has to control everything. It's absolutely crystal clear to me that fossil fuel subsidy reform is completely symmetrical with the underlying objectives of the convention.
We turn back to Damon Visdanba, who shared his views on where he feels fossil fuel subsidy reform is heading.
But we are seeing real progress in terms of awareness, whether this is recognition within the G20, whether it is events such as this one, and there was another one yesterday looking at the fossil fuel subsidy issue, and that you need to keep kind of hammering the point home in order to start making real progress. And it's a process. It takes time.